The dust is so thick right now that I cannot see my own hands. Not metaphorically, not exaggerating for effect. I am standing in the limestone crusher hall of a cement plant in Houston, Texas, at 3 in the morning, and my own hands, my own flesh and blood hands that I have had for 34 years, are completely invisible to me. The white powder hangs in the air like a living fog, like something that breathes, like something that is aware of me, standing inside it. And somewhere to my left, maybe 15 feet away, maybe 5 feet away, I cannot tell anymore. Something just exhaled. I have worked the night shift at this plant for 6 years. I have repaired this crusher maybe 40, 50 times. I know every bolt, every bearing, everywhere played on this machine the way. I know the layout of my own house in the dark. I can walk through my living room at 2 in the morning with every light off and not bump into a single thing, because my body has memorized the space. This crusher is the same. I do not need to see it to fix it. But tonight is different. Tonight the crusher went down at 2:47 a.m., which I know because my phone lit up with the maintenance alert and the timestamp is still burning in my memory. 2:47. That is important. I will tell you why that is important later. And when I do, I need you to think back to this moment right here because everything connects. Everything in this story connects in a way that I still cannot fully explain, and I have had months to try. Let me tell you about this plant first, because you need to understand the environment before you can understand what happened. A cement plant is not like other industrial facilities. A cement plant is loud, even when it is quiet. The conveyors never fully stop humming. The kilns run 24 hours because you cannot just turn a kiln off. The heat retention alone takes days to dissipate, and the refractory lining would crack from thermal shock if you cycled it. So even at 3 in the morning when the crusher is down and the primary feed is stopped, the plant is alive. It groans. It vibrates through the concrete floors and up into your boots and into your bones. You stop noticing it after a few weeks. Rule 1. You never enter the crusher hall alone during an active maintenance window without logging into the buddy system terminal at the entrance. The terminal is a simple touch screen. You enter your badge number, you confirm you are entering the space, and the system logs your entry time and alerts the control room that someone is in the hall. If you do not log out within your estimated job duration plus 30 minutes, the control room is supposed to call your radio and then physically dispatch someone to check on you. I say supposed to because that protocol assumes someone in the control room is actually watching the board, which at 3 in the morning with a skeleton crew of 2 people managing the entire plant is not always guaranteed. Rule 2. You do not climb on the crusher frame without a secondary anchor point. Standard fall protection, nothing unusual there. Rule 3. You never, under any circumstances, work on the crusher with the main disconnect in the locked out position if the secondary discharge conveyor is still energized. The 2 systems share a common frame, and the vibration transfer is significant enough that the moving jaw can shift even when the crusher itself is locked out. I learned this one from a technician named Gerald who worked here before me. Gerald is fine, by the way. He still has all his fingers, but the story of how he almost did not was told to me on my very first week on the job, and I have never forgotten it. Rule 4, and this is the one I want you to really hold on to. This is the rule that the old-timers talk about, the rule that is not in any official documented procedure anywhere, the rule that gets passed down verbally from senior tech to new hire, the way certain things only travel by word of mouth, because writing them down would make the company look insane. Rule 4 is this. If you hear your name spoken in the crusher hall, and you are alone in the crusher hall, you do not respond. You do not say anything. You finish what you're doing, you pack your tools, and you walk out of the crusher hall at a normal pace. Not running, walking, because whatever spoke your name is, apparently, drawn to panic. I was told this rule by a man named Desmond on my 3rd night of employment. Desmond had worked at this plant for 22 years. He was not a superstitious man in any other context. He did not read horoscopes. He did not knock on wood. He openly mocked the guys who would not walk under ladders. But he told me Rule 4 with an absolute seriousness that I had never seen on his face before or since. He said, "Son, I do not know what it is. I do not know why it is in this hall. And I do not know what happens if you answer it, because everyone who ever worked here long enough to hear was also smart enough not to answer. But I have heard it twice in 22 years, and both times I finished my work and I walked out, and both times I was fine." He paused, and both times, the guy who was supposed to come relieve me the next morning called in sick and would not tell anyone why. I asked Desmond if he thought the two things were connected. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, "I stopped asking questions about that hall a long time ago. Desmond retired 3 years ago. I wish he were here tonight." So, back to right now. Back to 3 a.m. and the dust so thick I cannot see my hands and the exhale I heard on my left. I have my lockout tagout kit applied to the main disconnect. I have my buddy system log, entry completed, estimated job duration, 90 minutes. I have my radio clipped to my left shoulder, channel 4, which is the maintenance frequency. I have a 4-cell mag light that is doing almost nothing in this dust cloud because the light just bounces back at me off the suspended particles, turning the beam into a useless white cone. I have my tool bag open on the crusher frame beside me, and I have identified the problem, which is a cracked toggle plate and a worn toggle seat that together are causing the jaw to track slightly off-center on its compression stroke, creating that vibration signature I had been watching for 2 weeks. The repair itself is not complicated. It is physical and dirty and done entirely by feel in conditions like this, but it is not complicated. I have done it before. I know exactly what I am doing. What I do not know is what made that sound on my left. I stopped moving. This is instinct. When you work in loud industrial environments long enough, you develop a sensitivity to sounds that do not belong. The same way a musician develops perfect pitch, your brain filters out everything it recognizes and flags everything it does not. That exhale did not belong. Not the conveyors. Not the kiln vibration transmitting through the floor. Not the settle of the crusher frame under my weight. Something breathed. I stand completely still for what feels like a full minute. The dust swirls around me in slow eddies. My mag light beam bounces back at my face, useless. My radio crackles once with static and then goes silent. And then I hear it again. Not an exhale this time. Something more deliberate. A slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the concrete floor. Coming from the same direction. Coming closer. I make a decision that I think any experienced maintenance tech would make in that moment. I decide it is an animal. Cats get into this plant all the time through gaps in the loading dock doors. We have found raccoons in the baghouse. Once, memorably, a coyote had gotten into the raw mill building and spent an entire shift eluding the efforts of 4 grown men to remove it. An animal in the crusher hall, in the dust, making sounds I cannot identify in a compromised sensory environment. That is the rational explanation. That is the one I commit to. I go back to work, and for about 20 minutes, that decision holds up just fine. I remove the cracked toggle plate, which is a 2-handed job that involves a lifting strap and a lot of profanity because the tolerances are tight and the dust makes every surface slick. I inspect the toggle seat, confirm the wear is within replaceable range, and I begin staging the new components for my bag. My hands work from memory. My eyes are essentially useless, and I have accepted that. And then, from directly behind me, close enough that the air moves against the back of my neck, someone says my name. Not shouted, not called across a distance. Said, conversationally, the way someone says your name to get your attention when they're standing right next to you. My first name, which I will not use in this account. and then a pause, as if waiting for me to turn around. And every single cell in my body wants to turn around. I have thought about this moment many times since that night, and I think that is the thing nobody tells you about truly frightening experiences. It is not that your body wants to freeze or flee. It is that your body wants to respond normally. My instinct was to turn and say, "Yeah, what's up?" the way I would if a coworker had walked up behind me. The social reflex is almost impossible to override. We are wired to respond to our names. We have been wired that way since we were infants. I override it. I go back to Desmond's voice in my memory, calm, completely level, 22 years of working in this plant behind it. And I hear him saying, "You do not respond. You finish what you are doing. You pack your tools. You walk out at a normal pace." My hands are shaking. I want to be honest about that. My hands are shaking so badly that I nearly drop the socket I'm holding, and I have to set it down on the crusher frame for a moment and press both palms flat against the steel and breathe. The steel is cold. Real. The vibration of the plant hums up through it and into my palms. I use that. I focus on the physical reality of the frame beneath my hands, and I breathe, and I do not turn around. The voice does not say my name again, but now there is something else. A presence. I know how that sounds. I know that presence is a word people use in ghost stories and spiritual accounts, and I am a man who repairs industrial machinery for a living, and I have never in my life used that word to describe something I actually experienced. But there is no other word for what I feel in the space behind me. A weight in the air. A density. The feeling you get when someone is standing close enough behind you that you can feel their body heat, even without contact. That feeling. Persistent. Unmoving. Just there behind me while I work. I complete the toggle seat inspection. I begin installing the replacement plate. My hands remember every step without my brain having to direct them, which is fortunate because my brain is entirely occupied with not turning around. Every few seconds the urge surges back up. Just look, just a glance, just confirm it is nothing. And every few seconds I push it back down. Because what Desmond said echoes in my head on a loop. Everyone who worked here long enough to hear it was also smart enough not to answer. Not to answer. Answering, apparently, is more than just speaking. Answering is acknowledging. Answering is turning around and making eye contact with whatever is standing in the dust cloud behind me. And by that act saying, "Yes, I see you. Yes, I confirm your existence. Yes, I am here with you in this hall." I'm not going to do that. I finished the toggle plate installation. I torque the retaining hardware to spec. And I check it twice because I do not trust my hands tonight. They're still not entirely steady. I replace the guard. I gather every single tool from the crusher frame and put them back in my bag, and I zip the bag and I lift it and I loop the strap over my shoulder. I do all of this slowly, deliberately, like I have all the time in the world, like there is nothing behind me, like this is just another night, another repair, another entry in the maintenance log. I climb down from the crusher frame. I walk to the exit of the crusher hall, and I do not run. I want you to understand how much I want to run. My legs are insisting on it. My lungs are insisting on it. Some primal, pre-language part of my brain that has not been domesticated by 6 years of night shifts and industrial safety training is screaming at me to run. I walk. The exit is a heavy steel door with a push bar. I hit the bar with my hip. The door swings open. Cold night air and the smell of the kiln hit me simultaneously, and I step through, and the door swings closed behind me, and I stand in the outside air for a moment, and I breathe. I go to the buddy system terminal, and I log out. Job complete. 2 hours, 17 minutes. I go to the control room, and I write up the repair in the maintenance log. The control room operator, a man named Phil who is 60 years old and has worked this plant longer than I've been alive, watches me settle into the chair at the maintenance desk and does not say anything for a moment. Then he says, "Crusher Hall?" I say yes. He is quiet for another moment. Then he says, "You okay?" I think about what to say. "I am fine. Everything is fine. The repair went well." I would like to think that is what happened tonight. I would like to close the loop that cleanly. But there's something in the way Phil is looking at me, something knowing and careful, that makes me ask, "Phil, have you ever heard Rule 4? He holds my gaze for a long time. Then he turns back to his monitors, and he says, "Go home after your shift. Get some sleep. And for the next week, if you can swing it, request a different work area." I asked him why. He says, "Because once it knows your name, it does not forget it." I put in for reassignment the next morning. Maintenance supervisor asked me why, and I told him I wanted cross-training on the raw mill. He approved it without question. He never asked anything else. I have not been back in the crusher hall at night since. I work it in daylight now, only in daylight, only with at least one other person beside me, and I have never heard my name spoken in there again. But 3 months after that night, Desmond came back to the plant for his retirement party. Someone had rented the break room. There was a sheet cake, the whole thing. And at some point during the evening, I found myself standing next to him, and he looked at me with that same careful expression Phil had used. And he said, "I heard you had a night in the hall." I said yes. He said, "You did the right thing." I said, "I know, but I still want to know what it was." And Desmond, this man who spent 22 years in this plant, who has forgotten more about industrial maintenance than I will ever know, looked at me with something I can only describe as genuine sadness. And he said, "So do I. But I made my peace with not knowing a long time ago. Some things you just leave alone." He patted me on the shoulder. He got a second piece of cake. And I stood there in that break room full of people I had worked beside for years, in the bright fluorescent light, in the warmth and the noise and the total ordinary safety of it. And I thought about the dark and the dust and the sound of my name in the air behind me. And I thought about the part of Desmond's rule I have never been able to stop thinking about. The part where he said everyone who was smart enough to hear it was also smart enough not to answer. Everyone, which means it has spoken to people in that hall for as long as anyone can remember. Which means whatever it is, it has been in there for a very long time, just waiting in the dust, learning names, asking questions that only the careful ones never answer. I do not work the crusher hall at night. Not anymore. Not ever again. But sometimes at 3 in the morning, when the plant is quiet and the dust is settling and the shift feels long, I find myself wondering about the ones who did answer. Not the ones like Gerald, who just almost lost some fingers. The other ones. The ones who worked this plant long enough to hear their name in the crusher hall and made the wrong decision in that long, terrible moment when everything in them wanted to turn around. I wonder where those people are. I wonder if they're anywhere at all. Story number 2. Something in this building is turning these machines on, and it is not a ghost. I'm not the kind of man who says that word easily. I am a trained electromechanical technician. I understand how machines work. I understand relays, contactors, PLC logic, sensor inputs, feedback loops, every possible electrical and mechanical reason why a piece of equipment might energize on its own. I have gone through every single one of those reasons in my head in the last 2 hours. I have eliminated every single one of them. And I am still standing here at 4 in the morning watching a 1,500-pound commercial mixer start itself up for the 3rd time, while all of its control power is supposed to be off. This is the food processing plant where I work night shift as an electromechanical technician. I've been here 3 years. The facility runs 24 hours, 3 shifts, processing and packaging commercial food products at a volume I cannot specify without violating my NDA, but let me say it is significant. The equipment is industrial scale: mixers, conveyors, depositors, packaging lines, heat tunnels, refrigeration systems. The kind of machinery that in a domestic context would be completely unrecognizable as the same category of thing as a kitchen appliance. The mixer I'm working on tonight, line 4 mixer, has a bowl capacity of 600 liters. The agitator runs at speeds up to 120 RPM under a 15 horsepower motor. When it is running at full speed and full load, the noise is foundational. You feel in your chest cavity, in your back teeth. I mention all of this so that when I tell you the mixer started by itself at 4:12 a.m., you understand that I am not talking about a subtle event. A device of that size, energizing unexpectedly, is not something you might miss or misinterpret. The motor contactor closes with a sound like a gunshot. The agitator begins moving. The structural vibration is immediate and significant. You know it is on. Let me tell you about the rules of this facility. Because like the Crusher Hall, this plant has rules. Some of them are regulatory, OSHA-mandated, FDA-compliant, standard for food manufacturing. But some of them are the other kind. The kind that exist because of things that happened, documented or otherwise, that nobody wants to talk about directly, but nobody is willing to ignore. The official rules first. Full lockout tagout before any work on drive systems. No single technician in the processing hall after midnight without radio check-in every 30 minutes with the shift supervisor. Personal protective equipment at all times in the production areas. No cell phones in the mixing room because of explosion risk from residual flour dust. That is a real risk. Flour dust is genuinely combustible. And the facility had an incident with it 12 years before I started working here that resulted in a significant insurance claim and a complete redesign of the ventilation system. Now the unofficial rules. The ones I learned over my first year working nights here. Never acknowledge the sounds from the East Corridor after 2 a.m. The East Corridor connects the mixing room to the cold storage staging area, and it runs alongside what used to be a secondary processing line that was decommissioned 8 years ago. The equipment in that line is still there, was never fully removed, just powered down and cordoned off with yellow caution tape that has been there so long it has faded to almost white. The sounds from the East Corridor after 2 a.m. are rhythmic. They sound like machinery. They sound like the old secondary line running. But the secondary line has no power feeds connected. I have personally verified this. I traced every conduit myself during a slow night my first year here, and the sound continue regardless. The rule is do not go in the East Corridor after 2 a.m. Do not shine a light down it. Do not call out to whatever is making the sound. Just close the door at the east end of the mixing room, which is a solid steel fire door, and leave it closed. Rule 2. If the line 4 mixer alarms without a corresponding fault code, do not clear the alarm immediately. Wait 3 minutes. If the alarm clears on its own in 3 minutes, document it as a nuisance alarm and move on. If it is not clear on its own, then go investigate. I asked my supervisor about this rule during my first month. He said it was a protocol established after a technician cleared a nuisance alarm prematurely and then went to investigate what turned out to be a significant mechanical issue and was injured because he had not given himself adequate preparation time. That explanation made enough sense that I accepted it. I'm not sure I accept it anymore. Rule 3. And I want you to listen carefully to this one because it is the rule that is running through my head right now as I stand in front of a mixer that should not be running. Rule 3 is this. If you're in the mixing room alone and the machine activates without a command input, do not touch the panel. Do not try to stop it. Back away from the equipment, take your tools, and radio the shift supervisor. Let the supervisor make the call on what to do next. When I asked about this rule, the answer I got was less satisfying. My supervisor, a man named Terrence who has been at this facility for 11 years and who I genuinely like and respect, looked at me when I asked and then looked away and said something that I have never forgotten. He said, "We had a guy try to intervene on a self-activating machine about 5 years ago. He said it simply and cleanly and without any additional detail. And then he said, 'We do not do that anymore.' And he went back to his paperwork. I did not ask what happened to the guy. I probably should have. Tonight started normally. I got the call at 3:48 a.m. that Line 4 was throwing an intermittent fault on the agitator drive inverter, F022, which is an overvoltage fault, usually caused by regenerative energy during deceleration if the braking resistors are not handling load correctly. Standard diagnostic. I have cleared F022 dozens of times. I pulled my lockout tagout kit. I isolated the machine. I verified the isolation at the drive cabinet. Checked voltage, confirmed zero energy state. Everything by the book. I opened the drive cabinet and I began my diagnostic. At 4:12 a.m., the mixer started. I want to describe for you exactly what I mean when I say it started, because I'm standing here right now trying to understand it, and I want you to understand it with me. The main contactor in the drive cabinet, which I'm standing directly in front of, which I could see with my own eyes, did not close. The control circuit, which I have verified, is de-energized. There is no control voltage present. I measured it. I have the reading. Did not receive a start command. The lockout device is on the main disconnect. The physical lock is on. The tag is on. I put them there with my own hands 20 minutes ago. And the mixer bowl is rotating. Not at full speed. Slowly. Maybe 20 RPM. The agitator turning through the empty bowl with a sound like a slow, wet breath. I back away. I take my tools. I radio Terrence. He picks up on the second call. I tell him what is happening. There is a pause, long enough that I check to make sure the channel is still open. And then he says, okay, get out of the mixing room. Come to the supervisor station. I say, should I try to stop it? He says, no. Get out of the mixing room. I get out of the mixing room. The walk from a mixing room to the supervisor station is about 40 feet down the main production corridor, past lines 2 and 3, which are both down for the night, and past the junction with the east corridor. The east corridor door is supposed to be closed. I have closed it myself 3 times tonight as part of my walk around at the start of shift. It is not closed now. It is open. Not all the way, maybe 8 inches, but open enough that the sounds from the east corridor are clearly audible in the main corridor. They sound like the old secondary line running. I do not look down the corridor. I keep my eyes forward. I keep moving. I get to the supervisor station, and I sit down across from Terrence, who is looking at me with an expression I recognize from my first conversation with him about Rule 3. The expression of a man who knows more than he wants to say. I ask him what is going on. He asks me what I saw. I tell him everything. The contactor, the control voltage, the lockout, the bowl rotating. He listens without interrupting. When I finish, he is quiet for a moment. And then he says this is the 3rd time this year with Line 4. I ask him what happened the other 2 times. He says both times the machine ran at low speed for between 7 and 12 minutes and then stopped on its own. Both times the technician on duty followed Rule 3, did not intervene, exited, called in. Both times nothing happened to anyone. I ask again about the guy 5 years ago, the one he mentioned when I was new. Terrence looks at the desk. He picks up a pen. He sets it down. He says his name was Marcus. He was a good tech. Better than good. Actually, one of the most capable guys I have worked with in 11 years here. And he was the kind of person, and you will understand this because I think you're the same kind of person who could not see a machine doing something wrong without immediately needing to fix it. That was just how he was built. So when Line 4 did this for the first time, 5 years ago, Marcus did not call it in. He did not follow the rule, because at that point the rule had just been put in place, and he thought it was overcautious. He went to the panel, and he tried to perform an emergency stop. I asked what happened. Terrence says the emergency stop command went through. The machine slowed, and then it reversed. Line 4 is not supposed to be able to run in reverse. The drive is configured for single direction. The contactor configuration physically prevents reverse rotation. But it reversed, and Marcus was standing at the bowl access door, which had opened on its own during the sequence, and the agitator. He stops. He picks the pen up again. He says, Marcus is fine. I want to be clear about that. He is fine. He works at a different facility now, different company, different state. But he does not work nights anymore, and he does not talk about it. I do not ask what the agitator did to Marcus. I find I do not want to know. I ask Terrence instead why the machine does this. What is actually causing it? He gives me a look that I think is meant to be a shrug, a dismissal, the kind of expression that says, I'm going to say the official thing now, and we both know it is not the whole answer. He says the engineering team has reviewed the drive configuration multiple times. They have never found a fault. The control logic has been audited. The machine is otherwise performing within spec. The events are logged as unexplained transients. I say that is not an answer. He says, no, it is not. He pauses for a long time. And then he says, do you know what was in this building before the food processing plant moved in? I say no. He says it was a cold storage and meat packing facility, operated from the 1940s through the mid-90s. Large-scale operation. And he says this carefully, like he has thought about how to phrase it. There were incidents here. Over the decades, workers injured, a few who did not go home. The kind of history that a building absorbs, he says, for lack of a better word. I think about the East Corridor. The sounds from the East Corridor that resemble the old secondary line running. The secondary line that was decommissioned 8 years ago. I think about how long whatever is in that corridor has been making those sounds, cycling through the motions of machinery that no longer exists, doing the work it remembers doing. I think about Line 4's bowl, turning slowly at 20 RPM in an empty room, the agitator moving through air, the rhythm of it like something breathing or thinking or remembering. I sit with Terrence until 4:51 a.m. when my radio crackles and the floor vibration beneath my feet changes. The mixer has stopped. We go back together, Terrence and I, and we stand in the door of the mixing room and we look at line 4. The bowl is still. The drive cabinet is as I left it, lockout tagout in place, control panel dark. No fault codes. No log entries from the PLC. I pull the event history and the timestamp sequence goes from my lockout at 3:54 a.m. directly to my return at 4:51 a.m. 57 minutes of machine time, unlocked. As if nothing happened. As if whatever ran the machine during that hour did not exist inside the system's memory, only inside mine. I complete my F022 diagnostic. The braking resistor is within tolerance. I find nothing wrong with the drive. I document the repair as completed, fault cleared, cause identified as transient overvoltage event, corrective action applied. I write none of this in the report. You cannot write this in a report. I clock out at 6:15 a.m. On my way out, I pass the East Corridor door. It is closed. The sound behind it have stopped. The sun is coming up when I get to my car. I sit in the parking lot for a few minutes in the growing light, and I think about Marcus and about what it means that the machine reversed when it should not have been able to reverse, and about what the agitator found when that access door opened on its own. I think about how a building absorbs things, as Terrence said. For lack of a better word, I go home. I sleep. I come back the following night, and I put my PPE on, and I do my walk around, and I close the East Corridor door, and I do my job. But every night, at some point between 2 and 5 a.m., I find myself listening, feeling the floor through the soles of my boots for vibrations that are not supposed to be there, watching line 4 from across the room, waiting for the bowl to move. It has not happened again since that night, but the event history gap is still in the PLC log. I saved a screenshot of it on my personal phone, even though phones are not allowed in the mixing room, because I needed proof that it happened, that I did not imagine it, that 57 minutes of machine time simply vanished from the record. I look at that screenshot sometimes. The timestamp jumps. 3:54, then 4:51. 57 minutes that the machine apparently did not experience. But I did. And whatever ran that mixer during those 57 minutes, whatever closed a circuit that had no voltage, whatever turned a bowl that had no command, Whatever reversed a drive that had no reverse configuration, it knows I was there. I'm certain of that, because the morning after happened, I found something in the mixing bowl when I came in to complete a different job. Something that should not have been there, because the room is locked when not in use and the bowl was empty when I left it. A single handprint in the residual flour dust on the inside of the bowl wall. Small, the size of a child's hand, facing inward, reaching up. Story number 3. The titanium screams. I need you to understand that I am using that word accurately and not for dramatic effect. When a carbide end mill cuts through titanium alloy at the parameters required to hold aerospace tolerance, the sound it produces is a high, sustained, metallic shriek that fills the entire shop and bounces off every hard surface and gets inside your skull and lives there. I am wearing double hearing protection, foam plugs under earmuffs, and it is still loud enough to feel. At 2 in the morning in an empty building the size of an airplane hangar, with no other sound in the world competing with it, that scream is the only thing that exists. Except tonight, between cuts, in the seconds of silence while I retract and reposition and prepare for the next pass, I can hear something else. Footsteps. This is a high-security aerospace machining facility in Wisconsin. I am a CNC machinist on a night shift. I have worked here for 4 years, and I have the security clearance to prove it. A process that took 8 months, 2 polygraph sessions, a background investigation that went back to my high school years, and a psychological evaluation that I passed narrowly enough that the evaluator made a note about it that I was told about, but not shown. The parts one machine here are used in systems that I am not cleared to know the full purpose of, which is a strange thing to make peace with, but you do make peace with it eventually. I machine the parts. Someone else assembles them. Someone else uses them. The chain of custody is documented down to the micron. The building itself is remarkable in an unsettling way. It is large. I have walked the full perimeter of the production floor, and it takes about 4 minutes at a steady pace. The ceiling is 40 feet up. The floor is precision ground concrete with a surface tolerance of 1 millimeter per 3 meters, because the machines it holds, the 5-axis machining centers, the coordinate measuring machines, the surface grinders, require an exceptionally stable substrate. The lighting is bright and even and color corrected because surface finish inspection requires true color rendering. At 2 in the morning with a full array on, the shop is as bright as an operating room, which makes the shadows at the far end, the end where the old manual machines are stored and never used, all the more pronounced by contrast. Let me tell you about this facility's rules. The official ones first, because they're extensive and they matter. Badge access is required at every door, including internal doors. The shop floor has 4 access points, and all 4 require active badge reads. You cannot prop them open. You cannot hold them for someone behind you. Every single entry is individually logged with time and identity. The security desk at the main entrance is staffed 24 hours. Cameras cover every square foot of the production floor with no blind spots. The camera placement was designed by a security firm specifically to eliminate any location in the building that is not observed. 2 guards walk the perimeter at irregular intervals. The intervals are irregular by design so that anyone trying to time them cannot. If you need to leave the production floor for any reason during your shift, you badge out. You badge in at the control room or the break room or wherever you're going, and you badge back in when you return. If your badge is not read at the production floor entrance within 45 minutes of badging out, security is notified. It is, by any measure, a very secure facility. There's almost no way for an unauthorized person to be inside this building. I keep reminding myself of that. Now the unofficial rules. This facility has fewer of them than the other places I have described because a facility this controlled does not leave much room for informal tradition. But there are 2, and they're specific. The first one, The manual machine section at the north end of the production floor is off limits during night shift. Not officially off limits. There is no sign, no barricade, no badge restriction. The machines are simply not running and have not been running for years. But the informal understanding is that night shift technicians do not go to the north end unless they have a specific documented reason. When I asked about this, I was told it was a safety protocol because the manual machines are not in current calibration and should not be operated, and proximity to uncalibrated equipment creates liability. That explanation has always seemed thin to me because proximity to uncalibrated equipment that is powered off and padlocked is not meaningfully dangerous. But I follow the rule. The second one is more specific and more strange. If you hear sounds in a shop that you cannot immediately attribute to your own machine or to building systems, HVAC, air handling, coolant pumps, do not investigate alone. Stop your machine, log the time, radio security, and wait for a guard to accompany you. This is the only facility I have ever worked in that has a formal protocol for investigating unexplained sounds. It is presented as a security measure, which makes logical sense given the sensitivity of what we machine here. But the guard's behavior when I have called in sounds, and I have called in sounds twice before tonight, has always been interesting to me. They arrive promptly. They conduct a thorough walk of the area, and they find nothing. But before they leave, they always ask the same question. The exact same question, phrased identically both times. They say, was the sound rhythmic or irregular? I have always said irregular because the sounds I reported previously were single events, a bang, a clatter, and both times the guard nodded and wrote something in his log and left. I have always wondered what the protocol is if the answer is rhythmic. Tonight the answer is rhythmic. The footsteps are rhythmic. They are occurring in the north end of the production floor, in a manual machine section, and they are steady and deliberate, the pattern of someone walking slowly and purposefully across a concrete floor. They are occurring in the gaps between my cutting cycles, when the spindle is retracted and the shop goes quiet, and the only sound should be coolant pumps and HVAC. The first time I hear them, I stop my machine and I stand very still and I listen for a full 30 seconds. The footsteps continue for about 10 more seconds and then stop. I radio security and I say there's sounds in the north end of the floor, rhythmic, consistent with footsteps. The guard who comes is a man I will call Anton. He has been a guard here for 6 years, longer than I have worked here. He is a big, quiet man who does his job thoroughly and speaks very little. He arrives on the floor within 4 minutes of my call, and he conducts a complete walk of the north end. I can see him from my workstation. He goes between every row of machines. He checks every corner. He finds nothing. He comes back to me, and he asks his question. Was the sound rhythmic or irregular? I say rhythmic. Something in his expression shifts. It is small. He is not an expressive man, but something changes. He writes in his log. He says, keep your machine running. Do not stop between passes if you can avoid it. If you hear it again, call immediately. I ask him what it is. He says probably a structural sound from the building. Thermal expansion. These big buildings move at night. I tell him thermal expansion does not produce a footstep pattern. He looks at me for a moment. He says, keep your machine running. He leaves. I go back to work. The titanium part 1 AM milling is a complex 5-axis component. I will not describe its geometry because I cannot. The drawing is classified, and the tool path runs for 11 minutes and 40 seconds per cycle. During that 11 minutes and 40 seconds, the machine is screaming and the floor is vibrating and nothing else exists. At the end of each cycle, the spindle retracts, the coolant pump cycles down, and the shop goes quiet for the 20 to 30 seconds it takes me to inspect the current pass and program the next one. In the second gap, the footsteps return, but they are closer. They were in the north end before. Now they're in the middle section of the floor, past the 5-axis machines on rows 7 and 8, somewhere around row 10 or 11, which is perhaps 60 feet from where I'm standing. And they're moving. I can track the progression of them, the way you can track a person crossing a room by listening to their footfalls, and they're moving south toward me. I call security. I say the sounds have moved, they are closer, they are continuing. Anton's voice on the radio is measured and careful. He says, I'm on my way, keep your position. He arrives in 3 minutes. He walks the middle section of the floor. He finds nothing. He comes back to me, and his face is doing the thing again, that small, controlled shift. He says, I'm going to stay on the floor for the next hour. Keep working. I say, Anton, what is in this building? He is quiet for long enough that I think he is not going to answer. Then he says there was an accident here. Before it was this company. The building was a different operation, different kind of machining, and there was an accident involving one of the manual machines in the north section. The machines that are still there. And the man who was involved in the accident, he stops. He says he worked nights. He worked this floor alone most nights the way you do. He knew this shop the way you know it. I wait. Anton says, we do not know why the sounds happen. We do not know what they want, if they want anything. What we know is that as long as the machines are running, your machines, the active machines, the sounds stay away. They're drawn to the silence. I think about this. I think about 11 minutes and 40 seconds of cutting cycle and then 20 seconds of quiet. 20 seconds of the shop going silent enough to hear what is moving between the rows. I ask Anton why management has not told the night shift workers about this. He says because knowing does not help. Knowing just makes the 20 seconds worse. He is right about that. I know now, and the 20 seconds are worse. I program my next pass. I start the machine. The spindle descends, and the tool engages the titanium, and the shop fills with that scream, that sustained metallic shriek that is the only sound in the world. And for 11 minutes and 40 seconds, I do not think about footsteps. And then the cycle ends. I do not look up from my screen. I keep my eyes on the toolpath display. I program the next pass as fast as my hands will move, and I am fast. I have been doing this for 4 years, and I know this machine, and I get the next cycle started in 16 seconds. 16 seconds of quiet. And in those 16 seconds in the silence, I hear nothing. Nothing. And somehow that is worse. Because the footsteps that were moving toward me have stopped. And I do not know where they stopped. I do not know how close they got before I started the machine again. I do not know what is standing in the rows behind me right now, waiting in the bright, even light of the production floor, patient the way only something with no remaining sense of time can be patient. I work through the rest of the night with the machine running as continuously as I can manage. Anton stays on the floor. He sits in a chair near my workstation, and he does not talk, and I do not talk, and the machine screams through cut after cut. At 5:45 a.m., the day's shift badge-ins start. The first day, shift machinist comes through the door at 5:48. The sounds of a second machine spooling up fill the shop at 5:55. By 6:15, the floor has 4 machines running, and the shop is fully alive with the noise and motion of a normal day shift. Anton stands up from his chair at 6:20. He picks up his jacket. He says to me, "Good shift." I say, "Is it like this every night?" He says, "Not every night, but nights like this, yes." I ask him if it has ever done anything. Made contact. Done something to someone. He is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "It found a technician once who ran out of material at 3 a.m. and spent 40 minutes waiting for a delivery of stock that was running late from the warehouse. 40 minutes of a quiet shop with nothing running. The technician was fine. He quit the following week. Didn't give a reason in his exit interview." I say, "But he was fine." Anton says, "Physically, yes." I clock out at 6:30 a.m. The parking lot is gray and cold in the early Wisconsin morning, and my ears are ringing from 8 hours of double hearing protection still not being quite enough. I sit in my car and I think about the manual machines in the north end. The machines that are still there from the old operation. The machines that the man who worked nights, who knew this floor the way I know it, used to run. I think about what it means to know a place that well. To work it alone in the dark and the noise for long enough that it becomes part of you. To be so embedded in a space that even after you are gone from it in every way that matters, something of the pattern of you remains. Walking the rows, doing the rounds, following the route your feet memorized over years of night shifts. I think about the way Anton said he worked nights, the way you do, as if to say you and the man who is still walking this floor are the same kind of person and always have been. I think about the 20 seconds of silence between cycles. I think about 16 seconds. The next night, I come in early. I reconfigure my tool path to reduce the retract time between passes. I get it down to 9 seconds. I have never run transitions that fast. It is at the edge of what is safe for the tool and the part, but I run it that fast. 9 seconds of silence. In 9 seconds, I hear nothing. In 9 seconds, whatever is walking this floor cannot reach me before the machine starts again. I tell myself that. I tell myself 9 seconds is not enough time. I run my cuts. The titanium screams. The shop is bright and loud and cold. And between every pass for 9 seconds, I do not look at the rows behind me. Because if I looked and I saw something standing there in the light, not a shadow, not a blur, but a shape. A man-shaped thing between the machines, familiar with the floor, patient in the way of something that has been walking this shift since long before I arrived and will be walking it long after I am gone. I think I would do what the other technician did. I would quit the following week, and I would not give a reason.